This episode of the Groundwork series, we're going to be talking about trail cameras. Matt, I bought my first trail camera I was 11 years old. I mowed grass and I bought it. It was like a case that had a magnet that you put near the lens that turned it off and on. Way back. That was over 25 years ago. And so all those years I've just accumulated trail cameras and trail cameras and trail cameras and put them out in all kinds of random places. And then we've got to work with so many landowners who place them out all over. And
in random places
I
as well.
can honestly tell you, over 70% of the trail cameras that I see are in bad spots or not set up correctly.
I hate to admit it, but it is the truth. There's more cameras that are wasted, whether it's monthly subscriptions that are being paid for and money being burned up, but they're not gathering the intel, or it's a misinformation or a wrong idea about what the herd actually looks like, or my farm didn't hunt good this year. Really? Why not? Well, my cameras weren't telling me that. And then you drive the farm and it's like, oh, well, no wonder they weren't telling you something. They were in horrible places. So
no doubt.
A lot of I see missed opportunities when it comes to hunt strategy, because the cameras are obviously essentially your eyes in the field, right? They're out there 24/7, so they're sitting there baking. They should be in places that you are hunting. And I think that, right, when growing up and consuming a ton of articles years ago, it was always when you had the ability, or not the ability, but you had the only way to get the cameras, go pull that SD card or take them with your first camera to get them developed.
Yeah.
You had to go in all the time, and it was, you don't want to put a trail camera where you're hunting at, because then you're just setting it up and you're disturbing that area. You want them in a different place. But hello, that's 2025. We are living in the world of cell cameras where that information's being sent to you as it's being taken and collected.
Yeah.
Totally different game. I feel like a lot of people haven't caught back up to the fact that we're not pulling SD cards as much anymore. There's still some play for that, and some of those cameras are still in work, but largely a lot of people are running cell cameras.
Yes. I think that's an interesting, or a very valid point to say, is if you're still running the pull card cameras, those are cameras that you should place in my experience, or right next to a tree stand, close to it, to where when you get done hunting, you pull it, and you may not pull that. You're collecting data from those for next year. Those pull chip cards, when it occurs, by the time you go and pull the camera, you're looking at last week's data. So you might as well let it cook and accumulate information. A lot of large, older age class bucks are getting killed with the information we gained in years previous.
Correct.
And so if you're using cell cameras, that's what a majority of what we're talking about today is, cell camera observations. And, I think we get asked all the time, where's the best place for September, early season, mid-season, during the rut, late season? Where do you put your trail cameras? And I honestly think that my answer generally gets kind of a shock from clients that we work with, that it's very simple for me. A large majority of my trail cameras are on mock scrapes. It's when I start breaking that down when people are like, oh, okay, you've got them on water holes with a mock scrape present. You've got them on food plot edges with a mock scrape present. You've got them on trails in the woods with a mock scrape present.
Yep.
There's lots of things, different features that I put trail cameras on, but the common thing that is there is a mock scrape lens.
I think, so basically in this series, right, this video episode, we're going to be breaking down preseason, early season, mid-season, rut, and then late season. But without a doubt, as we're diving into those each different subtopics, there's common themes that the cameras are getting placed around. Obviously, it's land usage, what the whitetail's doing, how you're, if you will, anticipating. This is the other thing I think people misuse them. Like, trail cameras are tools, right? Yeah. Not everyone will pick up a chainsaw and use that tool as effectively as other people. Mm-hmm. And I think that a lot of hunters, right, sometimes we think, well, the camera's out there, it's just going to get it. No, the camera has to be placed in the right place in the first place to be able to capture really good information. So it's a tool that we have to learn how to use, and it changes and evolves throughout an entire season. But like you said, I would say 75-80% of the cameras somehow are revolving around a scrape, because
even in September and
Sure.
even in January.
Without a doubt. But that is how, if we look at just the biology of a deer and how they interact with each other in a herd and communicate with one another, it is through scraping behavior. And of course, when they come in contact with each other in the field, they may go up and get downwind and smell, okay, who that is specifically. But when they're not in interaction with each other directly, it is through scent that they've been leaving at scrape sites. So this is we can't change that about whitetails. All we can do is realize that, okay, if they're communicating and they're going by these areas, I think that the best play is to work those mock scrapes or create the scrapes or put the cameras on them. And most importantly, too, talk about when we're actually cutting other scrapes down, because that builds into the effectiveness of trail cameras over scrapes. Is at some cases we need to be removing other scrapes that are kind of white noise on the periphery and single them out.
Yeah, I have two main analogies that I use with people with clients that we're working with to try to help them understand. But one of the biggest things being that when you look at the landscape that a white-tailed deer and the deer herd is living on, you have to go, okay, the scrapes are the main point of communication on the entire landscape.
Always.
That is their social media. And so whether they're cruising and checking a food plot edge or a ridge, the scrapes, wherever they're at in that specific location, that's their communication point. And many scrapes are on the landscape that don't get used but a couple of times and then they move on.
Certainly.
What we're trying to identify are the scrapes that get used routinely.
Yep.
And so that's where you talk about cutting some limbs down. So imagine you have a food plot edge that has a licking branch hanging over. That is a prime spot as long as the conditions are there for them to scrape on it. If you can find that and get a trail camera on it and then remove some of the competing scrapes around it and concentrate them all into one, that's what we're talking about.
Everyone's seen a buck walk into a field and check 2 or 3 scrapes along an edge, and then he goes out, peels out to the center of the food plot, and then just starts eating. Or goes and scent checks some does are in the plot. Well, then you're thinking, there's 3 other scrapes closer to me that he never even checked.
Yeah.
But, when I'm thinking and seeing that in the field, it's like, I could manipulate those scrapes and remove some of them off the table and make one just uber convenient that's within bow range of a tree stand. Now we're talking hunt strategy, but it goes back to the camera strategy is don't give them every option underneath of the sun. Concentrate them down with the way you place them and the way you manipulate the scrapes. But it's not just any old scrape.
Yeah.
Like the historical ones that are there every single year, because that obviously singles down where deer are going to be traveling, how they've been routinely traveling the landscape for multiple years.
Yeah.
That's a high value area.
For me, I want you to imagine those old Westerns that you had to watch with your dad. And you're watching these Westerns. What is the common denominator when didn't matter if it was an outlaw, a sheriff, a Texas Ranger, when they rolled into a new town, the common theme with the Westerns
door
was
swung open.
going to the saloon, not only just to get a drink, but to communicate with everyone to find out who was in town, what outlaws in town,
who just left town,
what's going on in town, what's coming up. That was the communication point. And so each food plot on your farm, each focus area on your farm will likely have a naturally occurring scrape, or you create one, and that is the saloon for that specific location. And those are the prime spots for your trail cameras. And so a new buck rolls in on your farm. You haven't had pictures of him ever, and all of a sudden he starts pinging on your trail cameras. Mm-hmm. He's cruising and checking scrapes, looking for receptive does, as well as learning who else is in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And that's a crucial thing to keep in mind. That the other main analogy is you're a store, you have a product that you're trying to sell. Take that Yeti tumbler sitting over there that you're drinking water out of. Your job is to sell that in a box store. You don't want to take that specific product and put it somewhere where people aren't focused on buying Yeti tumblers. You're thinking, okay, well, where am I going to sell that? By coolers? By the other drinkware? I want to be on an end cap where it's catching a lot of eyeballs. There's a lot of traffic around there. That's the best chance I have at selling that product. So if you have a trail camera, you're going to place it on your farm in a specific spot that you're going to catch the most foot traffic, that the deer are already going to be coming there to naturally coming by that spot, and they're going to look at that scrape and say, who's in town?
Mm-hmm.
And
that doesn't have to be the food plot, right? That can be a saddle. That can be intersection of logging roads. That can be benches on big ridge tops. That can be the edges of swamps, all sorts of different locations. But every property is going to have stronger scrape locations than others. And that's the way, again, we haven't even started to break down the different seasons of trail cameras, but just the importance of understanding how scrapes help deer communicate with one another, but also how that is going to help you gather the information of what the deer herd is doing, who is there, how frequently they are there. That really then allows you to utilize the tool of a trail camera in the best way, efficient way possible. Because that's what we're all after. Okay, the frequency, who's in town, who's using the area, what's their core, what's their hub, what's the periphery, right, of the range that they're utilizing. And then from there, how do I set up, how do I engage and try and cut that deer off, knowing I have all this core information from the farm, the property itself.
Yes.
And that is essentially around scrapes.
Yes, it doesn't matter. So if we go into preseason, we're talking about, let's just take the Midwest, for example, and we're saying preseason, August, early September. Mm-hmm. And we say, okay, where are our trail cameras in August and September? That's when I'm starting to shift my trail cameras around to more of the areas, the hunting areas, obviously. But I'm already putting some of them on the mock scrapes that I've set up in years past. These are not mock scrapes that are new ones that I'm like, hey, I'm just going to see if I can get pictures here. They're typically the ones that I know year after year after year I've had good, consistent activity on.
That a deer is going to hit as just a licking branch because he knows, hey, it's always present. Yeah. They engage with, they may not be like raking out scrapes, but they're engaging with licking branches 365. Yeah. You're talking about those ones in particular.
Those ones right there. On the food sources that are summertime food, so it could be alfalfa field, could be perennial clover, could be, even soybeans. That's where I'm putting my trail cameras, because if I'm in an area where there is no mineral, there is no feeders, and I'm trying to catch deer in their natural movement coming to food plots, I'm giving one indication of a one new spot in that store analogy to try to lure them to come stand in front of it so I can get better pictures, and that is the mock scrape. The other main feature at that point is late summer water holes.
For sure. Water, one that I've been keen into here lately is just the summer thermal hubs, like where I know, okay, they're not on that ridge top, they're not on that ridge top, it's too hot, it's not the right cover. There's 20-degree temperature change. Yeah. They're down there in the bottomland, so I'm going to be focusing efforts on some scrape limbs down there, some pinch point bottlenecks, creek crossings that are in and around bottomland areas that I know is going to congregate deer. And again, we could talk about, what about corn feeders and what about this and that? That's a little bit of a trump card, and every single state is going to be different, whether you can or you can't, or county by county, whether you can or you can't. Of course, if you have the opportunity to legally feed deer, sure, you can throw a bag of corn on the ground and get tons of pictures. But for those who can't, and for those who are trying to stay away from feeding for whatever reasons, these areas that we're talking about are high probability that you're going to encounter bachelor groups, because that's where they're using the landscape. But also, for your standpoint too, is like that's where they're choosing to communicate. Historical areas before really like the tendency to open up scrapes from bucks or increasing testosterone, they're not there yet, but they still are engaging with licking branches.
They're still communicating. Like I have trail cameras out right now where I have a bachelor group of about 5 bucks running together, and every other day I'll have pictures of them coming up to check this mock scrape, and it's one will check it, and then here comes the other one, and then the third one will walk right by, and it's just a great place to monitor this bachelor group and really see what's going on with them, if they picked up any new bucks.
Sure.
But it's just a fantastic spot. One thing I want to point out on your riparian area or down in these lowland sites, those are crucial and very beneficial from a standpoint of a lot of the vegetation. Not only is it cool because it's close to a creek and it's not in the blasting sun, but it's got shade
Yep.
Likely a breeze blowing through it. It's like going to the beach. You don't set up a 4-wall canvas tent. You set up an umbrella. You're out of the sun, but you have a breeze that blows through. And that's what's recreated with these thermal areas he's talking about in the riparian. But the other main thing is, especially in an area that doesn't have a lot of crops, is the native vegetation that can be found in those riparian areas that aren't found in the upland sites. Jewelweed being my favorite. Jewelweed, very, very beneficial, very attractive, and often found in these little wet seams next to creeks, down in the lowland
especially late
sites.
summer. Especially late summer. Most everything has, native forages wise have dried out. They've senesced or they're losing their palatability. Not jewelweed. No. It's still extremely got a very high water content to it, and then high phosphorus content and protein content. But they are foraging and selecting that out for sure in bottomland areas. But then also stinging nettle.
Yeah, stinging nettle as well.
Everyone knows it for it being, obviously, its stinging qualities, but deer will hammer that from a browsing standpoint late summer and into early fall as that frost hits.
No doubt.
Those are deer forages, native forages that, I mean, literally yesterday, you saw the pictures this morning, showed, I put that camera out yesterday, great bachelor group of bucks, walked right through it this morning, feeding on a stinging nettle. Those are definitely preseason areas, but there's still scrapes worked into it. Obviously, if you have crops, soybeans, alfalfa, hay fields that have been cut once or twice, have got a lot of legumes in it, white clover, red clover in particular, you're going to have bachelor groups in and around those areas.
To me, if you can find that food source that they're using and then use the water holes and the mock scrapes to try to concentrate them to get photos of them,
Bingo.
That's what you're looking for.
It's basically wide approach, find the landscape use that they're at, shrink in. Find the forage that they're in, shrink in. Find the scrape limbs, water holes that they're using, shrink in. Bam. Now we're going to encounter great trail camera history and building some inventory.
For example, like on my farm, it's surrounded by cattle pastures and big timber. So if you're trying to find bucks that you know are on the landscape but you haven't found them yet with trail camera, you're glassing fields in the evenings, catching them in the pasture. Okay, that's big picture. They're on that one. Okay, now they're probably bed in this area. Then you shrink down. Okay, here's a water hole I need to go check out. Found in tracks, shrink in.
Yep.
And then if you want to throw up a mock scrape around that, then you can really pinpoint and get some better pictures so you know who you're dealing with.
Now let's go from preseason into early season. Sometimes there's some big adjustments. Sometimes there's not big adjustment in the trail cameras. And one thing that I think a lot of people may find interesting is as we're talking about this and can speak to specific locations and things that we're going to move cameras to throughout a year, we're also, there's still like the trusty rusties on a farm where it's like, I know this is going to pick up great intel. But there's always a select handful of cameras that are held back that are test spots to go out and still, I know that spot's really good, but is there a better one? I might go and test one. I might go pull this one. I might go change here. There's always this constant evolution of moving cameras around throughout a season. So as we're breaking down those seasons, know that, like, sure, we don't want to be willy-nilly running through the forest trying to find the best spot, but at the same time frame, we have to learn a farm. We have to learn what the deer herd are doing. So if a camera has gone cold and it was hot, it's time to move it. Yeah. You have to keep that in mind, and I'd rather bump a deer and get intel for the next 3 weeks than go in and harvest it, as opposed to that camera just being cold and not being worth anything. If it's out there, it should be getting intel. So if you need to go and move it and make adjustments,
try to do it on wind-appropriate time frames.
Sure.
Where you're not blowing out bedding areas. But yes, absolutely. And things change. Limbs break down.
Food sources change.
An aggressive buck can come in and rip your licking branch down, and now you have to find a new one. But ultimately, as you shift from preseason into early season, let's say now you're in September and early October, to me, 90% of my trail cameras have now been focused in on scrape activity.
Yes. In
food plots, near water holes, even in a white oak flat, and going, okay, I'm going to make a scrape in here. My trail cameras will have a mock scrape in view. No questions asked. It will be there because it's just an attractive way to get those deer within view, rather than placing a camera in the middle of an oak flat, just saying, I hope he walks close enough for a picture. That's the same strategy as setting a stand up and saying, I hope he walks within range.
I want to add elements to that little setup that's going to make a deer stop, slow down, work a scrape, do something, give multiple images, or let's just say it's a group of 5 deer. Yeah. Well, the first one triggers it. The better 4 are out of frame, but depending on your settings of your camera, if it's a 30-second delay, you could have missed the rest of them. Mm-hmm. You've got to slow them down and give them a point of interest to work, or adjust your cameras and get tons of photos to look through. But make sure you're slowing those deer down in those focal areas to actually pull the information, get everyone accounted for and inventoried, especially when they're early season in a group like that. But
it's probably an appropriate time for me to describe a mock scrape for the people watching and listening, is where ultimately it's not just pick a licking branch and go in and slap a camera on it. There's a whole process that goes into it. It's a really quick process, but time and time again it's proven successful for us. And I'm identifying a licking branch that's probably 4.5, 5 foot off the ground, basically at antler level on a deer. So for me, I go up and I look, neck to chin high, looking for a branch, and I want to cut all the other branches off below that. So it's just the stem of the tree, the trunk of the tree, however big it is, with the licking branch coming out about neck high.
It's obnoxiously obvious to a deer that's like,
I want a blinking light beacon saying, come over here, there's an obvious scrape here. So remove all the lower branches. Then one of the biggest steps that is missed is not removing enough of the debris on the ground. Sure. Don't leave limbs, don't leave rocks, don't leave stobs.
It should be bare dirt like the top of the table. Yeah. I mean, clean, slick.
So a 6-foot diameter where you take a weed eater, or my favorite tool is that no gas, no oil hickory handle. It goes up to a U-shaped piece of metal with a serrated bar across the top. Poor man's weed eater. Mm-hmm. And I want all the debris and all the vegetation knocked out in a 6-foot diameter right underneath that licking branch. And then a 3-foot diameter in the middle of that bare ground. Just absolute bare ground. No big rocks, no limbs, no sticks, no nothing but bare ground. And then the most magical thing of all, right, is peeing it yourself.
Exactly. Activate that scrape.
Yep. We're not trying to convince, like people are maybe watching going, well, how do you know the mature bucks? I'm not trying to convince every 5.5-year-old on the landscape. All we have to do is to convince the spike to use it, who convinces the forked horn to use it, who convinces the 8-point to use it. Then all of a sudden we have the herd that's using that portion of that part of the farm, using that one scrape. And that is time and time again just the most effective way of getting inventory of the bucks on that portion of the farm.
And if they begin to open up other like minor subset scrapes around it, those get cut as season goes on.
Or if you notice that, hey, you know what, that one that opened up is actually in a better location. I've got a better tree to attach my my trail camera to. Maybe you shift it over 20 yards. That's what earlier you talked about when that trail camera was hot and now it's dead. I've had that happen before where I'm like, I had a great scrape, I had a good thing going, and all of a sudden it's stopped.
Someone opened up.
Sneak up there, and it's like, oh, they're using this scrape way more. Okay, I'm going to cut the one I made down and move the camera over to that. Yeah. And that is, to me, is
and that's the one thing about cameras. You feel like that camera went dead, but it could literally just be pivoting that camera just a little bit. That trail shifted, a log, a branch fell down, whatever. It could be minor things that influence the pattern, but you shift a camera around and you move it 10 yards, 20 yards, 40 yards, and wham, there all of a sudden it's like, this is what I've been missing. It doesn't have to be massive movements. It could be minor adjustments on the landscape throughout these different seasonal changes, but a camera is only picking up what walks in front of it. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's also that false expectation that, it's not a bait pile. It's not a mineral lick. A deer that comes there 4 days a week is in that area like almost every day. Don't feel like because it hasn't happened, every single day of that, you've got a weak pattern. Yeah. If a buck is there in a mature deer in daylight 3 to 4 times a week, I'm very excited.
Oh, absolutely.
That's a huntable pattern.
he's on his feet in daylight.
And I think that there's, again, like that false
probably
expectation.
almost every day.
Yeah, that like, well, I'm not seeing it every day. No. Your camera is not seeing it in the 20 yards in front of your camera, but that deer could have shifted and took a slight different trail. So don't misinterpret and put too much faith into the camera. It still is a tool, but you have to go and hunt these areas to get the full observational view of how deer are working in and around that landscape. I love them, but I think at the same breath, as we're talking about mock scrapes and what you can capture from them and getting into seasonality of the cameras, it's just important to mention, don't put everything, all the eggs into the basket of the camera. Mm-hmm. If you've got a decent pattern, please go hunt.
Yeah.
If not, you're going to sit out and miss
stuff. We say a lot of, we don't hunt a lot of early season mornings. But if trail cameras are showing a deer who's very active in the morning, maybe it's time to take advantage of that.
Wind is right?
And the wind is right, yes. And so trail cameras have they're a great tool in helping you build even more information into harvesting deer. When we're talking about preseason or early season trail cameras, though, understand what's happening at that time with bachelor groups. Mm-hmm. They're starting to shed velvet. They're starting to break apart. They're starting to get more testosterone. So they're starting to rub and scrape, and they're starting to move out on other portions of the landscape. What's one of the biggest things they're going to do when they're moving is find out who else is in the new area that they're at. Not a new area as in they've never been there, most likely, but a newer area because they're shifting from summer ranges to fall, winter ranges.
Correct.
And so they're going to start really working scrapes to kind of identify who's in the area. And so you really need to have your mock scrapes set up and your trail camera set up in that September, early October timeframe so you can start picking up and building out who's in the area and where they've shifted at, depending on the size of your property.
The other downside, right, I think, or failed opportunities that a lot of folks running trail cameras miss out on is the fact that they're not anticipating these moves at them. They are waiting for a camera to go cold, or they're waiting for something to not happen on the camera to tell them, oh, I need to move. There's some areas or some cameras where I know there's about to be a change, but I'm getting good stuff there. I'll move the camera knowing that within X week, those trees over there are loaded. That scrape is going to switch, right? They're going to get to that camera. So if I'm out on the farm, I'm going to anticipate moving that. Or, hey, we've got rain coming in. That food plot is going to green back up, and they're going to start hitting that food plot. I'm watching, and I'm looking at deer biology, saying, okay, yeah, testosterone's rising. They're starting to spar. They're starting to hit scrapes. I'm going to get a new shift of bucks in, so I need to have my cameras already ready on scrapes. I want my cameras to be 1 to 2 weeks ahead of activity as opposed to weeks behind activity.
Yeah.
And I think if you can do that, you're always one step ahead. And it takes time to learn a farm and know those things. But the same things happen just about every single year with deer biology, the timing of them, because it's all photo period driven. So it's not like, oh, is this going to happen this year? Yes. Bucks will be sparring. Bucks will be hitting scrapes. Bucks will be rutting. Does will be coming in heat. Like, we know these seasonality changes. The only caveat to that is food sources. They shift. Sometimes you have a hard mass. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes you're really dry in the fall. Sometimes you're not. Those things, right, can change. But we all have weather apps. We can all anticipate this stuff and get ready for the changes to come.
Yeah. So as you shift from early season and go into mid-season, which for me, mid-season is the rut.
Which let's throw a time slot in there.
Late October through mid-November for most of us. I'm kind of, the guys in the South are a little bit irritated because I'm not talking to them right now. But whatever that time frame is, then apply it to your farm. The rest of us who are used to this late October and November,
normal folk,
the normals, we're talking that very pre-rut where there's lots of scraping. Young bucks are starting to really cruise. Some of the older bucks are starting to really move in daylight, and all the way through the rut and peak breeding. That time frame to me is still a majority of trail cameras are sitting on scrapes. But one thing that I really start to try to do is get some of them moved in close to my really thick bedding areas, because I want to monitor who's moving in and around those bedding areas, because that's where a lot of the does start to shift, and they're starting to go into those thick areas to avoid the mass chaos anytime they walk out into a crop field or food plot. So they go into those thick areas. We call them bedding thickets, but manipulated timber to create destination bedding. And I try to put trail cameras or a trail camera on a mock scrape on what would be the downwind side for when I hunt it.
Sure.
So if I can only hunt that bedding thicket with south winds, then I want my mock scrape and trail camera to be on the north side of that bedding area. And I've seen this many times, is that you'll see those trail cameras pick up with the correlating wind.
For sure.
And in that case, that's just a scouting observation that can really put together what happens during that time frame. Doe becomes receptive, mature buck moves in. We might have 2 days of him with her, or however long he's going to, but it's, a day or two. And if he's on that bedding thicket, there's a very good chance he's going to be near and around it for that period of time. So if he pings on that mock scrape, it's time to get in there.
For sure. And that's the important important aspect of the midseason is you're going to go from a fury of like intense peak scraping activity in that late October, early November to it actually start winding down and dropping. But when those cameras are downwind of bedding thickets, that again you'd correlate your hunt and strategy and tree stand with, you're going to see that increase. But the deer may be blowing by. You may get pictures of blurs, but you know that bucks are chasing. They're not hitting that scrape necessarily, but that camera is still positioned, whether they hit that scrape or not, to be in close proximity where deer are going to be at heavier or more often because of the dense cover that they're all seeking.
No doubt.
And so that's where, again, we know that that's just deer behavior. So moving those cameras and anticipating that is a strategy to get ahead of it. But you're going to see that high peak in scrape activity late October, early November, and that's such a fun time frame on cameras. It seems like every day you wake up, if they're placed appropriately, it's like, do I know that deer? Do I know that buck? Mm-hmm. Is that a new guy who's coming from somewhere, some direction, and investigating? To me, it's like if I'm not getting unknown deer, my cameras probably aren't in the best areas, the best locations, because like you said earlier, if there's an unknown deer who comes in, the first thing he's going to be doing is checking scrapes in the focal areas, the saddles, the interaction or the intersections of logging roads and pinches and fence gaps and all the pinch points that deer normally walk through. Like that's the way he's going to use an unknown landscape, and you should capture that deer. You should be capturing the deer on trail camera before observing a deer that you don't know in the field.
Yeah.
I think that's a gauge, in my opinion, to know if your cameras are in the right place.
And to continue that, the gauge, another thing about knowing whether your trail camera's in the right spot is if let's say I have a 200-acre farm and there's a couple main ridges on it, do I catch that new buck on 6 different cameras as he works through the property? If I do, if I catch him on multiple cameras, then I know I have my trail cameras in a really awesome spot. They're in a really good spot because if he's moving around and he's hitting every one of them, I can track his movement through the farm. But if I have, let's say, trail camera 1 and trail camera 3 and 4 pick this deer up, but trail camera 2, which sits in the middle, didn't get him, that may tell me that it's time to maybe move trail camera 2 to find the more appropriate location for deer patterns. And I've done this on my farm, which is lots of elevation, where, you track a new buck on 8 cameras. It's like, I know who's coming through the farm now in this part because every deer that I feel like is on that food plot is coming to that mock scrape at some point during the week. And I can get a pretty good gauge on who's in the area.
It really lets you read the temperature, too, of the deer herd, of those behavioral changes, right? When does are getting into estrus, bucks are peak scraping, peak chasing, peak lockdown. You should be able to tell that very easily from your cameras.
No doubt. Because if your trail cameras blow up on the bedding thickets and they're not on food plots, it's lockdown.
Very much lockdown. And you need to change your hunt strategy accordingly. That's where, again, like most times people are looking at cameras from a reactionary standpoint, but if you have them in place, you should be getting the intel right then and there of exactly what's happening, reading the temperature of the farm, and knowing, hey, I need to adjust my hunt strategy accordingly to be in front of these deer, because You can't hunt deer 1 week behind. That's just not. You're not going to have nearly as much success as the strategies that we're talking about with trail cameras across a property. You can't be a week behind.
To me, the rut, the mid-season, let's say, is probably one of the most frustrating times because it really feels like feast or famine, which is the same thing you experience with hunting is, hey, I saw a doe and there was 15 bucks around me today. Or I slept for 3 days and saw one spike.
Get off the food plots, man.
Yeah, trail cameras the same way. Like that's why you need to have variance in not just on mock scrapes on food plots, but mock scrapes in the timber,
for sure,
in saddles, in pinches, next to bedding. So you can kind of feel, okay, they're really next to the bedding or they're really in the timber. That's where I need to be versus they're not in the food plot. And where are they not? Well, anywhere but a food plot. I don't know.
And I think everyone asks too, like, how many cameras should I need per acre? It's not every acre is equivalent. It's totally dependent from farm to farm. But here's what I would say. Don't skimp on having cameras. If you look at the big grand scheme of things from a hunting standpoint, there's a lot of pieces of equipment or tools that people like to buy that are 100% not necessary when it comes to hunting accessories. Cameras is one, though, I don't want to skimp on. I want as many eyes as it's feasible or that's necessary on the property to gather information, not just for what's happening right now in the current year, but to tell me what to do down the road as well. So I think that less is definitely not more in the trail camera situation. I'd rather have 2 sitting on a shelf, but know that I could have them out and know that I've got the farm covered with intel, like you talked about, the consistency. I know the hot spots of the farm, and I know how deer are using them, and I've got the intel coming to me.
Yeah. If by random chance this video, you're a wife of a landowner and you always struggle to find a Christmas gift for your husband, I know the trail camera isn't a bad idea.
Always great.
Somebody asked me, how many trail cameras should I have in my farm? More? Well, I didn't tell you how many I have. I don't know how many you have, but you need more. That's how I am. Like, hey, having a bunch is great.
Even if, and that's a great point is, let's say you found a good place. You're like, is there a better one? And you don't find one. That's information. Like that's telling you that I don't need to spend time there. I don't need to waste time going to it. I don't need to try and hunt and put pressure on that area. Well, because there's nothing on camera or there's not the frequency that there is here. Great. Don't go there. That gave you information, maybe not as valuable as others, but it still gave you information.
In my opinion, trail cameras provide more information to me than me sitting from afar and watching. Trail cameras being put out because I feel very confident in my setups to be like, if there's a deer around that area, I'm going to get him within a week. And so, one afternoon with binoculars, probably not. Now, if you're somebody in like southern Iowa and you have a huge crop field, you might be better off sitting there one night. But for us in the little fragmented landscape, the Ozark Mountains, it's
timber country
to have trail cameras.
Yeah, no doubt.
Late season, late season, we're kind of take a breath. The rut is past.
The craziness,
and now
holiday
we're putting
season.
Trail cameras up, going, who survived the gauntlet that is Missouri firearm season?
Let me ask you this: which is a bigger shift, your early season to rut camera movement or your rut to late season movements? Which do you feel like are you more adjusting cameras for?
I feel like that early to me, late season is not nearly as hard to identify and find them as early season. Because the bigger challenge that I have for late season is typically just finding them alive.
Yeah.
Because
to hunt deer, you got to have a live deer.
And so early season, they're at least still alive.
Yeah.
Late season is a little bit different. But to me, shifting into the late season kind of goes back to that early season or even preseason idea where big scope, identify the food, start zooming in on that, saying, what is the late season food? It is standing soybeans. Now let's go in, okay, where are they bedding from that? Let's kind of fine-tune it in. But I would still use, in the late season, those mock scrapes near and around the food source to try to pinpoint.
Yeah.
Because There are still does that are going to become.
I think
they're going to come receptive if they didn't get bred on the first cycle, and then you're going to have doe fawns who become big enough to become receptive.
There's a time frame of season that I feel like the majority of hunters miss out on. 100%, I think it's late season for some of those factors right there, but also the drive and the exhaustion that a lot of the deer herd is in, and the push to food, the amount of daylight occurrences that can happen, the amount of condensing of deer herds on the landscape when weather comes in, south slopes, thermal regions again, thermal regulation is super important. The food source, so like you can really isolate down on the landscape where deer are going to be at pretty quickly, and that's a huge advantage from a hunting standpoint. But that camera strategy standpoint, likely you're going to need to adjust quite a bit from the fall, or excuse me, the mid-season into the late season. And these deer may be moving a good distance from the bed to food pattern, depending upon the placement and the proximity of what is that late season food source they're going to, and then where is the winter thermal cover at. So it may be a long linear stretch of cameras now, not just this, more or less sporadic topography driven approach during the rut, thick dense cover approach during the rut. It is now, okay, I need to identify bedding, saddles and benches and stuff that they're crossing to get to that food resource, creek crossings, and then hammer the big field, most likely the food source that they're going to, and find those dominant scrapes around there. Because without a doubt, the bucks that do survive, they're still displaying dominance. You see them chasing fawns in the late season food sources all the time. They even get back into some bachelor groups up as well, and there's still a hierarchy in those bachelor groups, and they're working scrapes all the way through January and parts of February as well.
One thing about late season too is to consider that, in some cases, like in northern states, they become almost migratory in the fact that they shift their patterns so much and migrate out to, a 40-acre field that has cut corn or a patch that didn't get combined because it was too muddy to get there. And that's when you see these massive amounts of deer in a very congregated area. And if that's the case, that's when you start trying to identify, okay, I've identified the food source, but where's the bedding at?
Very important.
And that's where you may be spreading those cameras out. And I think of the story where brother killed that about 160-inch buck a couple years ago, where the trail cameras told us that the deer were nocturnal. And it's late season. You're like, Correct. They shouldn't be, there's a much better chance that they're going to move in daylight in late season than there are early season.
Yeah, the initial thought was they're nocturnal. Yeah. But we also knew better. I think that would be like the first hunter instinct. I can't hunt him.
Yeah, he's nocturnal. And the fact of the matter for that one was, he was nocturnal there, but he was daylight somewhere else.
Correct.
And so we kind of expanded upon where we thought he was coming from. Ended up being a mile away, cross cattle pastures, going, okay, he's probably bedded all the way over there. And that's when trail cameras could move and say, okay, that's where he's at. Now he's in daylight. Now that's my strategy.
That's the hunt strategy.
Yeah. But to me, even it didn't matter moving the trail camera from the food source all the way over. It was, do we just put the trail camera on some random tree on some trail and hope that he walks by? No, let's put a trail camera on a trail and put a mock scrape to try to stop him, to confirm that it's him, rather than just let's catch the tail end of a deer scooting down a trail.
The other thing is, too, when it comes to late season, is kind of similar to some early season, is cameras will tell you a big fraction of a story, but at the same time frame, if we're hunting larger food sources, a camera is a stationary thing that is focused on 20 to 30 yards out in front of it. It doesn't have the ability to zoom in and look at across the entire field. Sometimes you just need to go hunt a field. If you're seeing piles of deer go into that field, guess what? There's probably fawns. There's probably second, the second rut, second cycle that you might have deer that never hit that scrape. But if you're seeing piles of deer go in, I'm likely going to be going and putting eyeballs in the field. I might get a deer at 8 o'clock at night, check that scrape. Like, oh, well, he's nocturnal. No, he just was busy scent checking the rest of the deer in the field, and finally made his way to the food of the scrape on the food source after dark, and after eating because it's cold. So there's some of those tendencies, but regardless, you've got to find the food source. You've got to find the bedding, and it may be a lot farther than what you think, but if you have the two close together, you better be ready for daylight activity because they're going to be on their feet early afternoon, sunshine. They will be in those fields feeding, and on red oaks too. I think a lot of people overlook red oaks in December and January. If you know it's an acorn year for red oaks, you've got to be.
And you're not in crop country.
You've got to be on red oak acorns. Where are they falling? And absolutely, guess what? There's scrapes.
Yep.
We're going to create mock scrapes in those oak
flats. In simple terms, to try to summarize it all, early season, preseason, early season, try to identify those food sources and put mock scrapes out or water holes to try to encourage. You found the deer, now let's get them in frame. Mid-season or during the rut, we're identifying mainly travel corridors and bedding, so thickets. And we're putting mock scrapes out to try to get them. We've identified the funnel. Now I need them in frame. Then late season, we're going back to food.
Right.
And really trying to concentrate from there with scrapes to say, I found the deer, but I need them in frame.
Yeah, for sure. Now, one thing that we've kind of mentioned and hit on in the past has been the idea of historical information.
Yeah.
I think most people don't understand the importance of going back and reviewing your stored images to be building a hunt strategy for bucks that are in the mid-range age classes, right? If we're targeting 5.5 plus as a harvesting criteria for deer, there's a lot of deer that are showing their vulnerabilities as 3.5 and 4.5 year old deer that a good, wise hunter, land manager should be keen into. And you're going to get that and capture that through solidly placed trail cameras, but you have to learn from it. You can't just be solely focused on the target deer. You should be thinking 1 to 2 years in advance as to what the up-and-comers are doing now and how to be preparing a hunt strategy for them. They all have vulnerabilities within, I feel like, that early season, mid, and late season in the way that those deer use the landscape. If you key into it early, man, you can set a trap.
One of the biggest things you can do is identify those shifts they make, where it's like this deer lives on this ridge and these food plots, but late October he always takes a week-long shift and he goes over here and he's much more huntable then.
Right.
And it's like, okay, he did it the last 2 years. He did it as a 3-year-old. He did it as a 4-year-old. I'm gonna get him when he's 5, and he does that shift, and you're no longer playing the. He does a action and I do a reaction. You're doing an action, and as he's doing his action, that's when you can capitalize on it. So really building that inventory over the last few years, it's not to say that 5.5 and 6.5, 7.5 are easier to kill.
Sure.
But it's a whole lot easier to kill them when you have a couple of years inventory.
When you know what they've done for the past 2 years.
Correct.
It makes it a little bit easier.
Yeah. And to me, that's trail cameras. And then, the question that we often get is, how do you catalog all this? And it's like a thing between my ears, which may be scary for people like my wife. But if you can really just keep a note on how these deer shift, and maybe it involves mapping out on a map of his kind of core area and building off of that of your hunt strategy and, okay, what wins. But, there's all kinds of different software to catalog them. I personally haven't used a lot of them in past years just due to the lack of time, but you can. But for me, it's just identifying those patterns. You don't have to have it nitty gritty. I know we have clients that really break it down.
Yeah,
and you're like,
sure.
My goodness, that is a lot. But
it's
for
extensive.
us, it's just
but
it's expensive and it takes time. And it's like, okay, I just need the Cliff Notes version to kill them, and you can do that.
What I will do is, on an iPhone, you can create an album. And I just create, whatever year it is, and any good trail camera picture, I save it into that album. So I can go back and refresh. And obviously it's time-stamped and organized in a chronological order when it took place. And then I'm just scrolling through. Was it September when he showed up? Bing, bing, bing.
Oh.
Yep, there we go.
So
it was then.
This is how I do it. I just save the photo in my phone, which is why there'll be like 8,000 images in my phone. But I will go, okay, what happened? I'll go to the photos and I'll search September 20. I'll go 2024 or 2023, and I'll go to the month of September and I'll go through all those photos
Oh, see, I'll just break it down to a hit list and just tag. You can then tag it and put it right into.
And I'll be like, okay, oh, yep, there he is, right there, bam. And so, a lot of different ways you can do it, but don't overcomplicate it. I think trail cameras, oftentimes we take too much from them or try to take too much and apply.
There's a lot of assumptions made.
Yes, when in reality, it's like you can, if you get really good at placing them, and like I said earlier, when you're getting the same buck on multiple trail cameras as he traverses, it's a really good sign your trail cameras are in the right spot.
Right.
And that's when you're like, you can have confidence knowing, hey, my trail cameras are cooking what I'm gaining, and there's nothing on those trail cameras. Maybe it's not time to hunt. And then when it gets good, all of a sudden it starts pinging. Now it's time to go.
Yeah. Let me ask you this question. Within a week to week during the season, how much of a decision to hunt? Let's take away like schedule and time as an influence. But how much influence is trail camera information giving you to make the decision of I'm going in or I'm staying out? Like how much of weather impacts it? How much of wind impacts it?
Yeah. My trail cameras tell them they're in the area. They tell me he's in the area. Weather and these outside variables tell me whether or not I think he's going to move in daylight. That's how I place it together.
Absolutely.
So like trail cameras, if I'm not getting him on trail camera, and I have been getting him on trail camera, even though I have the weather, I might not hunt just because I'm like, if
he's shifted, something happened.
Something's off. I don't want to go and put pressure when he's not there.
Yep.
If he's been on trail camera and then I see the weather coming, I'm telling my wife, yeah, hey, next Friday, I'm probably going to be hunting.
So is that 50-50 camera weather? Is that 60-40, 70-30?
I'd say cameras is, I can't have one without the other in my hunt strategy. He has to be on trail camera for me to get excited to go. But then I also have to have the weather knowing that he's going to move in daylight. Sure. But I would put more emphasis on trail cameras than the weather.
Yeah, I'm kind of the 60-40 to 70-30. I got to have the confidence that the animals, I'm going to be going to the right area. But then right on top of that, is it 90 degrees? He moved when it was 78, but now it's 90. Are we going to do the same thing? Likely not. I'm going to stay out and wait. So they both have big impacts. But I first have to know, are you even in the area? Am I tracking with you? So I think that helps or should help those following along, right, to break down that influence of cameras to influence of other variables that say, hey, we've got a great chance. Let's go capitalize on what we've been seeing, or let's just stay out. Because that we can make a lot of assumptions with cameras. We can miss a lot of opportunities, but there should be a balance back and forth of your woodsmanship skills as well as trail camera placements and data from those that you should be taking to make those calculated risk of going in to capitalize on target deer.
Yeah, absolutely.